Hope that we have as Christians, a hope that gives us motivation to live faithfully, is the trust that we have that God will raise us from the dead and that we will live with Him for eternity. This hope that we have should give us purpose and courage and hope and boldness. But there are different ways of viewing this eternity with God, what this paradise with God will look like. And so this quarter on Wednesday nights, we're going to be talking about eternity and looking at what the Bible says about it. Now, I want to warn you up front, for some this will be a very challenging study. Mark's smiling at me, you know. This will be a very challenging study. The view that I'm going to suggest about eternity, which I believe to be the biblical view, is not what I would call the traditional view. Let's see if my clicker is working. Okay, good. Before we get any further, I want to quickly give you two different perspectives to kind of frame what we're going to be talking about this quarter. Two different views of what the Bible is about and what our future looks like. There are more than two views. We're going to talk about two. All right? The first view, which I will call the traditional one, says that we live in a world that was created good but became tainted by sin. Things are bad and broken, and we're lost in our sin without hope. The good news is that Jesus came to die for our sin and save us so that when we die, we can forever leave this broken world and live with God forever in heaven. People that reject God will spend eternity in hell. And in the meantime, I guess to use a sports metaphor, we're basically running out the clock. We're winning. We know that our team's going to win, but we're kind of running out the clock, doing our best to survive in a broken world, waiting for Jesus to come and rescue us. And hopefully, if we care about the Great Commission, we're trying to rescue other people as well. You might think of the Titanic going down. That's our world. And we're in the lifeboats. And we are going around trying to rescue other people, to save them from drowning. But the ship is going down. In a sense, this view is very much centered on me. God came to save, Jesus came to save me from my sins so that I could enjoy eternity forever with Him. I think this is pretty much what the non-Christian world thinks that Christians believe, except they kind of miss the very important part about God's grace. And so you see that line up there. We're trying to stay on the heaven side of that line. And a lot of the world thinks that what Christians believe is that we just, we try really hard and we do good works, and that keeps us on the right instead of going on the other side. Of course, we have a healthy understanding of grace. We believe that we stay on that good side through what God has already done for us and our obedient faith in Him. But I think this is the basic traditional view, at least for the last 100 years or so, of what the Bible is about and what happens in eternity. The problem is, I don't think that this is actually what the Bible teaches or is about. It certainly teaches part of it. Heaven and hell are real. Judgment is real. Jesus really came to save us. But the overall presentation of this view is not what the Bible teaches, in my opinion. Now, at this point, some of you are thinking that I am nuts. And that's okay. At this point, that's okay. I just haven't given you anything other than just an overview. All right? So this is the first view. The second view, which I will argue for in this class, says that this world was created good as the dwelling place of people. It parallels heaven, the dwelling place of God. That's why these two are kind of linked. Genesis 1:1. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. At the beginning, these two realms are closely united. God was able to dwell with people. He walked in the garden with them. But we messed it up. We sinned. The earth became tainted, and our close relationship with God was destroyed. Our sin separates us from God. We were kicked out of the garden, right? And the close union of heaven and earth is driven apart. Things are bad and broken, and we are lost in our sin. And more than that, our accumulated sin multiplies, and it continues to defile the earth. That's what that black spot is on the earth. In a real sense, we've created hell on earth by our very sin. We've messed stuff up. God's good creation. With our cumulative rebellion against God. The good news is that God is not content to leave things this way. Jesus came to rescue and redeem all of creation to himself, including humanity, and specifically to confront the problem of sin. Through his death and resurrection, Jesus has brought about a new order of things, as Paul calls it, new creation. One day he will return, and sin, Satan, and death will be fully defeated. The entire cosmos will be made over into a new heaven and new earth, a unified whole, and God will dwell with his people forever, while those who reject him will be separated from him forever in hell. In the meantime, rather than running out the clock, waiting to be rescued, or even frantically rowing around in our lifeboats, picking up survivors while the earth sinks around us, we are actively involved as citizens of God's kingdom and agents of new creation in taking back the world that rightly belongs to God. We do that by living according to the principles that Jesus lays out for his followers, inviting others to be citizens of his kingdom as well, and seeking to counteract the effects of sin in our world. Now, these two views share a lot of common terms and concepts, but when you look at them as a whole, they are two very different perspectives on the story that the Bible is telling and what eternity is like. All right. Overview of the two views. Now, here's your questions to talk with the people around you. What is your initial response to this? Luke is nuts. That's okay. If that's your initial response, that's fine at this point. What is your initial response to this? Which of these views is more familiar to you? Then, does one of these views seem more credible than the other? So I'm going to give you a few minutes. Talk about that, or talk around the people around you and discuss these questions.
Absolutely, I'm not nuts.
Oh. I may or may not be. Any thoughts? Initial responses? It sounds crazy. Has anyone ever heard of this before? Okay, we got a few hands, a smattering of hands.
Well, most of us, because we said, I mean, it's pretty new. That's what we were talking about. It's not new tonight,
Okay,
but it's
newish.
within a year or so. When did we do that class?
We wrapped it up a year ago.
Okay.
Exactly. It showed up in my Facebook memories.
All right, so newish. For anyone just completely new, really weird. It's okay. Be brave. It's all right. Raise your hand. Yeah, Charles. Yeah, me too. I mean, not tonight, but more about that in just a minute. Yeah, very different for some people. I bet right now that, is it safe to say most of us, traditional view? Yeah, like, yeah, good. I mean,
Well, that's what we've been ingrained
of course, yes, yeah.
But what you're saying makes sense.
Okay.
I mean,
Well, thank you.
when
That's
you
very.
present it in that way, it's like,
Oh, I can see that. Okay, yeah. So, I just want to. Yeah, absolutely, for sure. Like, I haven't done anything right now, right? I just laid out a cue. It could be crazy or whatever. Yeah, I'm not trying to get you to believe anything right now.
Really, either one, I mean, they're good.
Yeah, it sounds good.
I'm not worried about it.
Yeah. All right. So, very good. Let's talk a little bit about background of this. Luke's personal story. This is not going to be like a real emotional sob story or anything, but this is something that I've been wrestling with for literally 10 years. All right. When I first heard this alternative view, which I'm going to call New Heavens, New Earth. All right, that's just going to be shorthand rather than calling it like this new thing or this thing you've never. New Heavens, New Earth. The idea that God's going to recreate everything into a new heavens, new earth, which is the language that Revelation 21 uses. Pretty much everyone believes in new heavens, new earth. It's just what does that look like? But I'm going to call this a new heavens, new earth view. When I first heard this view, I was in grad school, my third semester, and I heard this and I thought it was nuts. Like, has this teacher ever even read his Bible? I mean, does he even know? I had several immediate objections based on some specific passages of Scripture, but as it turned out, my teacher had read the Bible, and he had answers to my objections. And so it made me very uncomfortable. I didn't really think about it. I just kind of mentally put it up on the shelf and didn't worry about it. Time passed, and I continued to read and study because I was in school for a really long time, right? And this would continue to pop up over and over. And I came to realize that this wasn't a new interpretation, but actually a very old one, and one that, by the way, had been held by a lot of our ancestors in the Restoration movement. Alexander Campbell, David Lipscomb, James A. Harding, people like this had held this view. And so I gradually came to think, well, maybe this isn't crazy. I can kind of see it either way, kind of like what Carrie was saying. Eventually, though, I began to study some of the specific passages that I had previously used to try to refute this view. And as I studied them closely and in context, they actually seem to argue against the traditional view rather than for it. And we're going to get into those during this quarter. And I grudgingly thought, well, this new heavens, new earth view seems more biblically accurate to me, but I'm not sure that it really matters. So that's where I was until about 2 years ago. And then we started this little thing called Story of the Bible, which you all are very familiar with. You've been kind of beaten over the head with it for a really long time, right? Our Sunday morning Bible class. As I had never actually personally done before, I sat down and studied the Bible, book by book, writing dozens of lessons about different books and drawing main ideas from them. This was a group project that we did, but Jared and I think between the two of us wrote lessons on about 60 out of 66 books. It was great and exhausting. If I had to do it over again, I'm not sure that I would. It was a lot of work, okay? But we started this project with no intention of teaching a different view on eternity or emphasizing anything related to eternity. But as we studied this book by book, it just hit us over and over and over. Because when you look at the whole thing, it seems to be, in my opinion, what the story of the Bible is about. It just hit me over and over and over in a way that previously I'd kind of been able to ignore. Now, some of you noticed some of that. as we went through some of the lessons and watched some of the videos, some of the notions about what the Bible was pointing to were very different than what we had traditionally talked about. And I know some of you noticed because you talked to me about it, or you maybe made some comments, or we discussed it. And it became clear to me that we needed to discuss this more. So I went to the elders, and they agreed. And so we actually sat down and studied this for several weeks. And we had a great time, didn't we, Mark? We enjoyed it. Sat down and kind of wrestled with Scripture and discussed passages back and forth. And really, it was a good practice for us to get into, and we've even continued that. Now we're just studying other stuff, just because we enjoy doing it. But it was a good practice for us. But we challenged one another. At the end, to be honest, I'm not even sure where all of our others are on this. I didn't give them a test, like do you like my view? You check yes or no. We didn't do that, but they no longer thought that I was crazy. And I think a couple of them did when we started. And they wanted me to teach a class on it. So, here we are. I want to talk for a few minutes. We're not really going to have time to get into a lot of stuff tonight, but I want to talk for a few minutes about the goals for this study. And I have 3 of them. Interestingly enough, one of my goals is not to convince you to believe what I believe. If I do that, great. Because I think I'm right. Right? Because you don't hold a view that you think is wrong, right? If you only believe something you think you're right. But that's not actually my goal, is to convert you to my way of thinking. I do have 3 goals though. Number 1, look at what the Bible teaches about eternity with an open mind. Based on the discussion that we've already had, this class is going to be challenging for some of us because it is very different than what we've heard for a long time. And I get that. It was challenging for me. I am stubborn, and I give up my positions very slowly and with great difficulty. And like I said, I've been working on this for a decade. Ultimately, I don't ask you to agree with me, but I do ask that you have an open mind and honestly consider what we talk about together. Let me try to use a metaphor. In Churches of Christ, we have a somewhat peculiar view on baptism. And by peculiar, I mean different than what a lot of people believe. And by that, I mean we believe that baptism is a necessary part of the process in which God saves us, right? God offers us His grace, we respond to His grace in obedient faith, and we're baptized, and we think that's a part of salvation. Many of our religious friends and neighbors would disagree with us on that. Baptism is important, you should do it, it's a commandment, it's a sign that you're becoming part of the church, but they would say it's not a necessary part of salvation, right? You've had the discussion, you're familiar with this. Well, why is that? Why do we view it this way, and a lot of our religious friends view it differently? Is it because they're stupid? Maybe 1 or 2 of them, but on the whole, no. I mean, some of us are probably kind of dumb sometimes too. But no, it's not because they're stupid. Is it because they're dishonest? They read the text and they just refuse to believe it? Again, I don't think so. I think it's because they've been taught something their entire lives. And it's kind of hard to change that when you're taught something your entire life. It's not because they've never read the verses. If you talk to them, I mean, you showed them Acts 2:38 2 dozen times, right? And all the other verses that we like to use. The issue is that they've heard it a different way forever. I think this is similar. I don't think that you have to understand this, what I'm going to be presenting to be saved. I'm not meaning that. What I'm meaning is, I think it's very hard for us to understand something differently than what we've always heard our entire life. And so I would just ask you to keep in mind that and try to have an open mind. Honestly, if you sit here and you're like, I know what I believe, this is nuts, I don't care, you're not going to get anything out of this study. So I would encourage you to try to keep an open mind. How can we do this? Number 1, be engaged in the class, all right? If we have discussion time, try to discuss. We can learn from one another. If there are homework assignments or readings, and there will be homework assignments and readings, try to do those. It'll help you prepare outside of class and come ready for our discussions. Secondly, and this is tough, make arguments based on Scripture, not on tradition. Ultimately, what I'm going to teach you is correct or is incorrect based on what? what Scripture says, right? That's absolutely the standard that I want us to evaluate this by. So, based on that criteria, arguments that start with, whether this is in your mind or in the group discussion or whatever, arguments that start with, well, you know, I hear you say that, but I always thought, or I've always been told that. I just want to gently suggest that those are probably not the strongest arguments, all right? Because I'm already acknowledging that we're kind of bucking up against the traditional view, okay? So I'm very interested in arguments based on Scripture. Very, very interested, all right? So I think those are a couple ways in which we can try to keep an open mind. Number 2, another goal, challenge ourselves. Some of the stuff we're going to talk about is very challenging. It will be hard. It will require us to look at certain passages of Scripture very carefully. I apologize about this, but we're going to have to talk about some Greek, right? We're going to have to talk about some of that stuff. We're going to have to look at some history stuff. And for some of you, like you worked hard all day, and you were exhausted, and you came here and you eat, and you'd like to just fellowship with people and study something, and I'm going to make it really, really hard. And I'm kind of sorry about that, but kind of not. Sorry, not sorry, as my teenagers would say. I'm going to do my best to make everything as understandable as possible. I hope that you will stop me and ask questions if I'm doing a poor job at that, and by all means. But if you feel like some of this material is difficult, that's okay. It is supposed to be difficult. I'm not sure where we ever got the idea that we can become mature Christians by never challenging ourselves, never forcing ourselves to dig deeper into God's Word. That's not true. All right, so this is going to be some challenging stuff. That's okay. It's intended to be. And then number 3, at the end, respect one another regardless of which conclusion we come to. Now, I think this is an important topic. And near the end of this study, I will explain why I think it matters. Regardless of what heaven looks like, what eternity with God looks like, I think you can get there either way. But I think it matters for how we live in between. But if at the end of this study, if you're not convinced, if I haven't convinced you, that's fine. Understanding how eternity works is not necessary for you to enjoy it. Getting this right or wrong is not a salvation issue, though I would argue that you will appreciate and anticipate your salvation more if you hold to the view that I'm going to suggest. But it's easy for me to say that because I like what I'm talking about. But even if we disagree, we can still respect one another, right? Still brothers and sisters. This is not a deal breaker, okay? So these are 3 goals. I think they're pretty simple, but I think they're pretty difficult. Honestly, all of them. To be open-minded about something when we've heard something our entire lives. I mean, I've already confessed to you. It's taken me a decade, right? You got like 13 weeks. So I don't expect you to fast forward and microwave these views that I've been baking in the oven for a decade of my life. But I do ask you to try to have an open mind. I know that'll be challenging. Challenge ourselves. I mean, obviously that's difficult. But I think that we should do this. I don't think that we should be Christians for 30 years having consumed milk for all that time.
Amen.
We have to move beyond that. And so I'm gonna try to force feed you some steak or something, I guess, in this class. And then number 3, this is hard because we live in a society that is all about disrespecting people specifically because we disagree with them. Right? We see this all over the place. We live in a very divided and divisive society where we cannot have civil disagreements about anything. And that's really unfortunate. It's also very un-Christian. It's not the way that Jesus calls us to live. So, I know these are challenging goals. I think we're up to the challenge, though. So, just kind of keep these in mind. Yes, sir.
It's going to be important for everybody to be here every Wednesday night because if you don't, you're going to miss some key points that you won't understand.
I appreciate you saying that. Yeah, so we're going to be building off stuff. So we'll talk about something, and we'll try to kind of establish that and build off. And if you miss some weeks, by the way, if you miss some weeks and you want material, I've got it. I'm a manuscripter. I've got all the stuff. So I'll give you the stuff. But if you miss weeks, You might be lost the next week. So thank you for saying that. All right, so those are our goals. We've got a few minutes left, and I've got one little thing I've got to try to cover before tonight ends and before I give you your homework. So, yeah, homework on the first week. That's the way we roll, all right? So, okay. Before we close tonight, I want to cover this briefly. And really, I just want to plant a seed in your mind for you to think about moving forward. Important to this discussion that we're going to be having is our understanding of heaven. A lot of times we think of heaven as a place, which is up there somewhere, right? And part of that is reinforced by the fact that sometimes the Bible uses heaven in different ways. Sometimes it uses heaven as a synonym for the sky. I mean, sometimes it is referring to a literal place. But more significantly, Scripture views heaven not as a place, but as a realm or a space. And specifically, God's space. And let me try to explain that a little bit more. Brandon smiled at me. He's heard of this before. Heaven is God's space in the sense that heaven is where God is. Earth is human space. So there is, a spinning ball of rock that we are on right now called Earth. But also in another sense, Earth is the habitation of humans. Heaven is God's space. Okay? So at different times in the biblical story, we see these two spaces, these two realms, the realm of God and the realm of humans, overlapping in significant ways. And if you think back to the image I showed you that started with heaven and earth kind of overlapping, because in the beginning, what do we see about God's space and human space? It's kind of a shared space, right? God is with them in the garden. He's walking with them. Sin messes that up, but there are other times, if you think through the biblical story, of times where God's space, God's dwelling, overlaps with human space. The tabernacle, right, is a holy space, and there's like a holier part of that holy space where God's glory dwells. Later that becomes the temple, but basically the same thing in permanent form. Something really significant happens as far as these spaces overlapping with Jesus. John chapter 1 verse 14, the Word became flesh and dwelt among us. That word literally means, tabernacle. Yeah, he set up his tent and lived among us. So this is tabernacle language. And so now we have God coexisting with human space in a new way. After Jesus leaves, he promises that he's going to send a helper, right? And we read in Corinthians, do you not know that you are the temple of God, that his Spirit lives in you? And so we still have this sense in which we have kind of these but it's different. It's not like it was in the beginning. We just have these kind of pockets that happen at different times, and then it's pointing forward to the end, and we're getting way ahead of ourselves, but in the end, when heaven comes down, and the new heaven and new earth are brought together. Alright? So, the seed I'm trying to plant. Spaces rather than physical locations. So, heaven is God's space where God dwells. Earth is the human space. And we see these interacting at different points. Okay? Does that kind of make sense? You don't have to be completely on board with everything I'm saying, but you understand what I'm saying is spaces, right? Alright, very good. Okay. So, try to keep that in mind as we move forward. Homework. If you have a phone, you might want to take a picture of this. If you have a really good memory, you might just want to remember it. If you have a spouse, you might want to get her to take a picture of it. Okay. I haven't advanced the slide. I'm sorry. This is not the homework. Here we go. Sorry, I have seen slide. My monitor back there is not always working. So, okay. Eschatology. That is a fancy word which just means. Here, sorry. Let me get the whole thing up there. Sorry, guys. I'm really putting on. Okay, that's the whole thing. Eschatology is. Okay, I'll talk while Jared fixes that. Sorry. You really will be able to take a picture of this. Eschatology is a fancy word which just means the study of the end times. So what we are doing right now in this quarter is we are having an eschatological study, which means we are studying the end times. That's what we're doing this quarter. I lost my monitor here. Okay, so your homework for this week. You don't even have to look up all of these, but look up, just pick one, and I'm hoping in a class this size that we will all kind of combine, pick all of these. Pick up, I want you to pick one of these things and look it up. Premillennialism, the AD 70 doctrine, or Jehovah's Witness eschatology. Now, I tried to write those in such a way where if you Google that, you will absolutely find what you're looking for. All right? Next week, what we're going to do when we come together, we're going to talk about some other stuff too. But we're going to talk about these three ideas because I'm not suggesting any of these things. Okay? This view is not any of these things, but often people confuse it with these things and think that that's what we're suggesting, and it's not. Some of you might know what these are already, some of you have never heard of them, and that's okay. That's why we're doing a little research. And what we'll do is next week, we will come back when we meet, we'll get someone to kind of summarize each of these views, and we'll analyze those and distinguish